Hi everyone, welcome back. And today I'd like to get to work on what I'd like to refer to as the bigger picture. Um, not just focusing on stuff like cylinder heads and individual components, but what it's all going to go into when it's completed. And this is a 27T that I've had for almost 30 years. I've never been able to complete it, but now is my opportunity, now that I found a spot in my life where I'm able to put the time and the effort toward it, and I'd like to share some of that experience with you and show you some of the drawbacks, the pitfalls, and hopefully some of the solutions. And maybe I can learn from some of the commenters too. Just please keep everything respectful. I don't mind people disagreeing with me. That's how the world goes round. We have disagreements and we work through them civilly, but if you're going to be rude, please keep it to yourself. I have no time for that. But anyway, what I have here is a total performance chassis that is identical to a 23T's chassis, except for it's longer. And when I got it, all the brackets and everything were not welded on it. I had to have that done myself. I had to, find where I wanted the rear end and the radius rods and all the panhard bars and stuff like that. The linkage all had to go in a specific place because the wheelbase on this 27T is a lot longer than the 23T. This is, if you'd see this thing in person, and you'd be like, wow, yes, it's 120-inch wheelbase. And a lot of that has to do with the type of front end that Total Performance used on their kits. It was what they call a suicide style front end. Why they call it that, I don't know. But anyhow, it extends out beyond the front of the frame, not back under the frame like if it had a subframe from another car on it or something like that. But anyhow, that's getting off the point of what I wanted to get at. So what I have today is certain components right where I want them. I got the radiator with the grill shell kind of mounted on there. It's just kind of taped up where it's going to be, as a finished product. It's not permanently mounted. And I have the radiator located where I want it. The engine with a turbo 375 connected to the back of the replica block there, and everything's tilted down so I can move the shell body over here, and I'm going to do that myself here in a few minutes. These bodies aren't heavy. I can move it around pretty well on my own, and that's one of the beauties about these small cars, is that it doesn't take a whole lot of manpower to put them together. One person with pretty decent mechanical skills could complete one of these cars. It's just that this particular setup needs a lot of checking, rechecking, and before you come up with a finished product, you should check again. There are some things I have to change because years ago I mislocated the steering box and the brake master cylinder. That's mounted a little too far back in the frame, so when you sit in the car, it's almost like you can reach down and use the brake pedal as a handbrake. You certainly can't, if you got longer legs, you certainly can't reach your foot back far enough. So that's going to have to get cut off and then re-welded in a different spot, and I'll show you that here shortly. So I'm going to flip the camera around and we can take a look at what we got here. Okay, here's what I have here with this Summit small block Chevy replica block and a Speedway Automotive short aluminum water pump. And what we do is we start from the front to the back. I got the headlights mounted where I want them, the radiator about where I want it, and we're going to get the body set back on here so I can check the firewall and transmission tunnel clearances. And what I was talking about, the steering box and this master cylinder being located too far back, right here it is, almost back here. And when this is finished, I'm going to move it a little closer up here by about maybe 4 inches and shorten the steering rod so that the brake pedal and the steering column are going to be in a much better position. But this is what we have so far. And then over there is the polyform body, and I have a set of doors to put in it, and we'll get to that at a different time. But right now I'm going to move the body back over on the chassis, see how all our clearances look, and I'll be right back with you. Okay, so there we have it. That took about 5 minutes for me to get that moved over. So as you can tell, this is not a studio shop. This is an average Joe shop, and that's the way I like it. I make videos for average people that want to do the street riding or other automotive, and I throw in some other stuff as a lack of a better term, bonus. But so there we got the body sitting on, and now I'm going to straighten out the transmission and the engine setup, see what kind of clearance we have in the engine bay area. Okay, so I'm going to raise the tail end of the transmission up, which is going to level out the works here. And like I said before, this is a lot of checking and going back and rechecking. So what I need to figure out is, am I going to have enough clearance between the transmission and the floor? Am I going to have to make the transmission tunnel a little longer or deeper? And with the finished position of the transmission, am I going to have enough road clearance? That's the big thing. You don't want this thing dragging on the ground every time you hit a bump. So let's take a look at what we got here. Okay, so far this Turbo 375, this is just about touching the back of the transmission tunnel. So I may have to modify that a little bit. There's the yoke, and then there's the rear end. So that may work just about in that position right there. But grab my tape measure. We'll see what the difference is between the rear end and the yoke and the tail housing of the transmission. Okay, at this position here, I have about 19 3/4 from the floor to the center line of the yoke for the transmission. And then if I go back here, it's about 20 1/2, so about 3/4 of an inch difference. And That should be close to okay. As long as the yoke has enough travel for suspension movement as you go over bumps and whatnot. As long as that has enough travel to and fro, that should be fine. So next, let's go take a look at the front end. Okay, so here we have pretty good clearance at the bell housing, so if we need to get in there, we can without too much trouble. And moving farther forward, we have the water pump and the radiator. We'll grab my tape measure and we'll check that real quick. Okay, so there's about 4 inches from the front of the impeller shaft of the water pump to the radiator where I have it positioned, and that should give us plenty of clearance. I'm going to mount a Scott's electric fan to the radiator, and then we're going to double check that, see how that works out, and hopefully that'll be our final go with this. Okay, so now I'm going to remove the radiator from its temporary mount, which is just a piece of 2x6 that's positioned right where I want it, and radiator's mounted down to that. So I'm going to remove this grill shell, and that's just held on there. Tape just an approximate location where this thing is going to wind up. Set this out of the way. Nice safe spot. Here's my Scott's electric radiator fan. Still new in the pack after 27, 28 years. And here's our mounting hardware with some electrical components. And what I'm going to do is take some time, open this up, read some instructions, get an education, and I'll be right back with you with a radiator mounted with a fan. Okay, that looks like that's going to be the hot ticket right there. Here's our mounting feet for the fan, and that just fits this radiator perfectly. I guess it should, because it was made specifically for it. So let's get it attached. Okay, so what I'm going to use is some tape to hold this fast to the radiator, because if I mount it, it's going to be a pretty much permanent thing, and then I'll have to cut these if I want to take the fan back off at a later date to do any kind of work to the radiator or the fan, or just move things around. So what I'm going to do is take some of this tape, and I'm going to tape it to the radiator, make sure it stays on there good and tight, and then we're going to remount it and see how it looks in comparison with the water pump, and take a look to see if that's where we want the engine to be in the radiator. And from there, we're going to mount everything up in a future video. Do this right. I'm going to just take the whole damn length of it. There we go. like I said previously, this temporary mount for the radiator is just a piece of wood clamped to the bottom of the frame. And this is going to give me a good idea of where I want this thing mounted, front to back. And when I go to make the finished radiator mounts to attach to the frame, and then I'll determine how far I want it up and down. And that's also going to dictate how I'm going to make a hood for it, because sometime in the future I'm going to make a custom hood. Do that on video. We're going to make a pattern, a buck, and we're going to lay out a hood the way I would like it. Something unique to me. And it'll be unique to the car. Just some of the real characteristics of what street rodding should be like. You know, you got a guy that puts a little bit of his own touch to it. Draw this down tight. Snug. So there it is. That is the nose to the water pump shaft to the back of the radiator. Not the radiator, but the fan that's going on it. Now this would be different if I had a fan that would mount to the flange here. I'd have a little bit more clearance, and then I could probably make a shroud to go over it. But in this case, we're going to go with this electric fan at first, since I already have it. And here we are. Just gotta take a little more time. Like I said, it's a lot of checking and rechecking and going back and rechecking when you're putting stuff together and you want it done right. So if you were able to sit through this, I hope you like it, and we'll catch you pretty soon in the future when we have some more interesting things to do, probably a little more interesting in this. But you know, you always got to start somewhere. When you want to get something finished, you got to get your butt moving. So everybody, have a good afternoon and take care.